Welcome to another episode of the brand called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome for a second time a very knowledgeable author in Indic scriptures from New Delhi, India, Abha Sharma. Abha, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Absolutely an honor to be here talking to you once again.
Thank you. Uh, Abha is an author of a book titled Vediquant, a book about Vedantic truth in quantum science. And in the last podcast, we spoke at length about Vediquant and quantum science. Today, we're going to talk about another subject. So let's go straight into it. And we're going to talk about limits of the mind. Is there something beyond the mind, or does everything appear because of the mind? So, Abha, let me start by asking you my first question. How do the Vedantic texts describe the nature and limitations of the human mind?
The mind, as we commonly understand, is everything related to the brain activities like memories, intellect, thoughts, everything. But in our common understanding, we normally cannot think beyond the mind. Mind is the ultimate level for us in our common understanding and even for science. But in Vedantic thought, there is a shocker over here because Vedanta says that mind is just one of the attributes of consciousness. Mind is just one thing that consciousness projects. Just like the body is projected in consciousness, the mind is also projected in consciousness. That means the mind is not the ultimate reality. No. The mind is very powerful. It can take you to any corner of the infinite universe in a fraction of a second. Yet it has a lot of limitations. The first one being that the mind is fickle. It changes. We are happy sometimes, sad the other times. It's not constant, which is evidence enough that the mind is not the absolute reality. The mind also changes with time. I had the mind of a baby at one time, and now I have the mind of a grown-up person.
Right.
So the mind is not absolute. It's just a projection of consciousness. And Vedantic texts devote a lot of time and space to explaining the nature of the mind and why the mind is the reason of joy as well as of suffering.
Very
So it
interesting.
has lots of limitations.
Very interesting. So, for our viewers and listeners, Abha, can you give us one or two examples of how we can differentiate between consciousness and the mind?
Definitely. To give the basis of this explanation is like consciousness is the ultimate reality. Mind is
Right.
projected in consciousness by consciousness. I'll take a very Vedantic example. Just imagine you standing yourself close to the sun. I mean, the sun of the solar system. Like, as soon as we do that, our brain runs into a dozen thoughts like, okay, can I even stand near the sun? Would I be vaporized? Can you see yourself melting? A lot of thoughts just rush through your mind. No. The first thing to note here is that your mind took you there to that place. Like your mind can take you to any place in the universe. Like you can imagine yourself in a starship right now. Right? So, but here is the most important aspect of consciousness. Like your mind took you close to the sun, but your mind could have taken you there only if consciousness was already over there. Like this shows that consciousness is all pervading. Your mind can take you to any place because consciousness is already there. Oh, like they mention in the Isha Upanishad that runs faster than the mind. No, something that runs faster than the mind has to have a speed greater than that of the speed of light.
Right.
So that is consciousness because if something is all pervading, when we say pervading, we don't mean in a sense of like something coming into objects and giving some entity to it. It's like all pervading means that everything is because of consciousness and in consciousness. So that is one way of explaining how consciousness and mind are different. Another way is like when I imagine like when I was a baby or I was a teenager, it was the same me.
Right.
Right now, it's the same me, but the body has changed. we have the body of a baby at one time, like we've grown up then,
mm,
and circumstances change throughout life.
mm,
There are people who are born with perfectly healthy bodies. They suffer diseases, like, or they even unfortunately lose a limb.
yeah.
That's the change in the body
Mm,
and the change in the mind, but the consciousness stays the same. So that is the most crucial difference between mind and consciousness.
mm. Fascinating. Thank you. And what role does the mind play in the journey towards self-realization as per Vedantic philosophy?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because when we say the mind has limitations, the mind is somehow put into a corner, like, okay, the mind is not sufficient. But
Mm,
here's the most interesting part, that the mind is absolutely essential, an essential tool to realize the absolute nature of reality.
mm,
Because the mind has faculties like logic, reasoning, intellect, memory. All
mm,
these things can help us realize the ultimate truth, because in this human life, we have certain facilities that we need to fully utilize to reach the absolute.
mm,
When we talk about realizing the absolute truth, gaining more higher states of happiness,
mm,
mind is absolutely essential over there. So the Upanishads and other Vedantic literature, they make one thing very clear, that utilize your mind, know, to reach that level of understanding, at least intellectually.
mm.
When we are there intellectually, we at least understand with logic, with reasoning. The
Right.
flash of understanding will immediately happen. So
Mm,
mind is essential in that.
mm. Very interesting. And Abha, what insights do the Upanishads offer about states or realities that exist beyond the grasp of the mind?
Right. The entire Kena Upanishad deals
Mm,
with that.
yeah.
And there's this fabulous text by Gaudapada, that is the Karika on the Mandukya Upanishad. It has
Mm,
4 chapters. And both these texts are outstanding in explaining what lies beyond the mind.
mm,
Uh, it is very clear that the absolute reality lies beyond the scope of the mind.
mm,
you know but when we say that in our common lives, it sounds like, okay, I need to join some yoga retreat, maybe I need to take some course on meditation to realize that. That's the beautiful aspect of is that we can realize this here and now,
mm,
right now. There
mm,
are a number of techniques to make that happen.
mm,
There's a technique of Drig Drishya Viveka, and then there's the technique of the 3 states of the mind.
mm,
Many techniques, like we can follow any one of those,
mm,
and be very clear about the thing that there is something that lies beyond the mind.
mm,
The absolute reality is there, but
mm,
it is not so out of reach. It's not so unapproachable. Like, if I use Swami Vivekananda's words, he said it is more than known. It is unknown, but more than known.
mm,
Oh. What does it mean? It's like we can demonstrate it, like, very quickly and very clearly through the example of the stages of our sleep.
mm,
Uh, that's one of the favorite examples that the Upanishads use.
mm.
There's a state of deep sleep known as sushupti,
Right.
and it's the non-REM sleep, non-rapid eye movement
Yeah.
sleep in
Mhm,
science. It is a state where there is actually no mind,
mhm,
which means that the necessity of the mind is not there. In
mm,
deep sleep, we don't have dreams, we don't have thoughts, we are not even aware of being conscious.
mm,
Yet, when a person wakes up from deep sleep, the person is absolutely conscious, the person is alive. This is Gaudapada uses a term for this, which he calls amani bhava,
mhm.
which means negation of the mind.
Okay.
So this is a state where there is no need for the mind, and that is a state of very, very close to the nature of absolute reality, which we know as Brahma. So
Mm,
Gaudapada says that this state of deep sleep can give you a hint of what enlightenment is like,
mm,
but it's so close to that state. And what's remarkable is that all of us go through that state every night when we sleep. We just need to recognize that. We don't recall what we went through, but we do realize that, okay, we were in a state of deep sleep. So that is a state beyond the mind. But it is there. It is very much reachable right now. We just need to be in the right frame of mind to recognize that.
Great response. Thank you. And how does the Vedant address the concept of ego in relation to the mind?
Ego is basically the sense of I. It's my identification with my mind, body, my thoughts, my memories, emotions, everything that I recognize as I, which is the I-ness of a person. So ego is a projection of the mind itself. The mind gives this idea that I am somehow this body-mind complex, which is my identity. But in truth, if I identify with my body mind only, I'm only inviting suffering. Because it's like the example of the waves in the ocean, right? A wave rises in the ocean, it has some identity for some time, but then it merges back into the ocean, into its real nature, which is water. So the ego makes the particular wave believe that this is what I am, this is my identity, this is my role, and the ego is essential for living in this temporal world, because we need to identify with our bodies to take care of it, with our minds to motivate it in a certain direction. So ego can be helpful, but ego, when it turns into ahankar, it has a very negative effect on a person. Which is like some form of arrogance, like identification completely with my I-ness. I don't want to even recognize the other waves in the ocean. So that is a sufficient negation for my existence.
Very well said. My next question is that how do the Vedas and the Upanishads talk about the mind's role in creating human suffering or dukkha?
Yes, this is one of the key aspects. Like, I think the origination of Buddhism was because of this question only. Why is there suffering in the world? So, they said, dukkham, dukkham, sarvam dukkham, like everything. So there's suffering everywhere.
Correct.
So there are two levels to this. First is like, what is suffering actually? If a person has pain in the body, the pain is localized, it's physical, but suffering is in the mind. Okay. The mind is the seat of all suffering. Even medical science, there have been too many experiments to prove, like we know about how placebos work. And there have been experiments like the locus of pain in the human body physically is not related to how the person perceives the pain, in the sense like the doctors say that the pain is not as much in the body as it is in the mind.
Right.
Pain is there. Pain is a physical reality. But it's my choice whether or not I want to take it as suffering. So that is where the mind again comes into a role. It has a role over there. It's the mind that tells me that I'm suffering, and the levels of suffering. I might say, okay, I'm suffering because I have pain, but I also might think my life is doomed because I have pain and because I am suffering.
Right.
So that is the whole problem with the cause of dukkha in Vedantic thought, is identification with the mind-body complex. Both of these are temporary things, and we identify with these two things and spend our entire lives doing that. It's easy to say that, sitting here and talking about lofty philosophy, it looks like it cannot be applied in daily life. But I can vouch for it that we can apply it in our daily lives every second of our lives. It's just about the conditioning of the mind.
Very well said.
Right.
Yeah, well said. So one more question, and then I'll move to the second question. First question we asked you was limits of the mind. We'll move to another question. My question relating to limits of the mind is, how does Vedant view intuition or knowledge that comes from beyond the logical mind?
Right. This is something that sounds too philosophical,
Hmm.
but again, it's not that difficult to comprehend.
Hmm.
We all have intuition. We all know something that we perceive as premonitions, which we think, okay, we somehow saw this earlier. Actually, when there's just one consciousness pervading this entire universe and every entity, it's not difficult to come around to this aspect. Uh, like, uh, can I have the key words from your question once again, please?
No,
My
so I
mind
said, how
comes.
does Vedant view intuition or knowledge
Okay.
that comes from beyond the logical mind?
Uh, Actually, I'm so sorry. I had
No
asked you to
worries.
repeat that question because intuition is one thing that my mind just goes everywhere. There's too many fabulous things happening in this context.
Hmm.
Uh, Intuition is something, we commonly perceive of as something that, okay, ultimate intuition is going to be in the state of samadhi.
Hmm.
But samadhi, again, is just a state of mind.
Right.
It is not the absolute reality. It
Hmm.
is essential in understanding the absolute nature of reality.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
intuition, we all have it all the time. We just brush it aside.
Hmm.
Again, it's the role of the ego.
Hmm.
When I try to feel like, okay, the person I hate is somehow similar to me, I just don't want to accept it.
Hmm.
My intuition tells me that, okay, all of or both of us the same. I don't like that person, but that person is almost like me.
Hmm.
That creates a feeling of love and empathy, which I don't want to do because it will
Right.
challenge my notion of my ego, my identification with myself.
Right. Very interesting. So, Abha, now let's talk about the second question that I wanted to address, which is, why is it difficult to recognize the truth? And my first question is, can you help us understand the concept of unknowability, avidya, and ego? And we've spoken about ego in our earlier question also. How are unknowability, avidya, and ego presented in the Vedas and the Upanishads? And what is their significance in recognizing the truth?
Everything exists in this universe. I won't say for a reason. It exists as a tool
Hmm.
to reach the absolute reality. So unknowability, ego, avidya, all of these can have a disastrous effect, but also they can lead us to the ultimate truth.
Right.
The concept of unknowability is also being addressed a lot in quantum science
Hmm.
because scientists are realizing that maybe there are states of understanding that lie beyond our grasp.
Hmm.
So the entire effort of the scientific community is towards transcending that unknowability.
Right.
Now, Large Hadron Collider is just one example. They're colliding particles to understand, okay, what is this universe made of?
Hmm.
So to understand the concept of unknowability, there's one very effective example from the Upanishads.
Hmm.
It's the example of a mirror.
Hmm.
Like if you're looking at yourself in the mirror,
Hmm.
you look at your face and your body, but never in your life can you look at your own face yourself.
Hmm.
You know your face exists
Correct.
because you see your face, the reflection of your face rather, in the mirror.
Hmm.
So, just like the reflection in the mirror, we are conscious because of the reflected consciousness of the absolute reality.
Hmm.
So, we see our face reflected in the mirror. That's why we know that we have a face actually and what it looks like.
Hmm.
It's the same, like it's unknowable to us as a first hand experience, but the mirror helps us realize that. All of us are reflected consciousnesses and not consciousnesses actually. When I'm talking of Vedanta, I'm talking of Advait Vedanta
Hmm.
basically. So
Yeah.
here we talk of only one consciousness.
Hmm.
So unknowability is there, but it's not that unknowable. There are means and tools of recognizing that unknowability.
Right. 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 Thank you.
And
Go
uh,
ahead. Go ahead, please.
Avidya is I think more relevant these days than it was ever earlier because we
Hmm.
live in an age of so many media where things like misinformation, even disinformation is being circulated. So that's the work of avidya. Avidya is an aspect of maya. Its only purpose is to keep you away from the truth. It does it in many ways. In a way, it's kind of a challenge to the human mind. Like, okay, can you transcend avidya to realize the absolute truth? So transcending avidya is absolutely essential.
And would a literal translation of avidya be ignorance?
Right. Avidya is basically perceived of as ignorance, but avidya is a term that encompasses a lot of factors. Ignorance is one of the factors, which is the primary factor, and ignorance is the one that is the root cause of every other problem. That's why avidya is loosely translated as ignorance.
Right.
But ignorance of what? It's not my ignorance of botany or physics that's leading to avidya. It's my ignorance of my true nature.
Correct.
Right. So ignorance of my true nature is avidya because it keeps me away from that absolute reality, which avidya doesn't want me to see. Because that'll free me from everything. So that's why it's ignorance. And ignorance of the basic nature, you can imagine, like if an entity does not know what its true nature is like, it's never going to have a successful life.
Right. And just as an aside, would avidya also be, and this is for a lot of our viewers and listeners, would also be something similar to what we are now all talking about, imposter syndrome?
I'm not fully aware of the imposter
Okay.
syndrome,
Okay.
but I get your thing. Like, yes,
Not
avidya,
basically not accepting
yeah,
who I am and what my own reality is.
absolutely.
Okay.
I got the gist of it because yes, that's the main role of avidya. It makes you believe in falsehoods.
Right.
It veils realities. It's simply put, like we commonly say, if you tell a lie 100 times, it appears as truth to you.
Absolutely
It
right.
does not become the truth. It has the appearance of truth. So that's the role of avidya.
Right. My next question is, how does the concept of Maya in Vedant relate to the quantum idea of multiple realities?
Yes, it's a vast question, and Maya, like they say, is the most difficult of concepts to explain and to understand.
Right.
But again, Vedanta is beautiful in this sense that it has such perfect and effective examples to explain concepts just right away. The most well-known example is the example of the snake and the rope.
Right.
I think nothing can explain the concept of Maya better than that. Because the example goes like this. Okay, if there is a piece of rope lying on a road, and somehow it appears to you to be a snake.
Right.
Okay, you believe that rope to be a snake for some time. There's another person who can mistake it to be a garland of flowers, like I say. So for the two of you, it is the reality. Like you think it's a snake, so you think it's a snake, but in reality, it's a rope. That's like the absolute reality of the universe is like. It appears to different people in different forms. That's the work of Maya. Maya makes you see the world like we see it, with name, form. Maya has different concepts. It has anything with name and form is the work of Maya. Right? Time, space, causation is an aspect, are aspects of Maya.
Right.
Along with it, Maya has another role. It's called the veiling of reality. It hides the reality from us.
Right. Very interesting. So time for just one more question, Maya, Abha, and this is that how does the journey towards recognizing truth in Vedanta and quantum science lead to a personal transformation?
It can transform a person like nothing else can. There can be nothing more empowering than realizing this, because personal transformation, basically, what it means is like, if you had the choice of being the most powerful person in the universe, or if you had the choice of being the most fearless, which one will you choose?
Right.
That's the most powerful person in this universe. If the person is fearful, is not powerful enough.
Correct.
So fearlessness is the absolute state. And that is how Vedanta can empower you with this thing. Even with the knowledge of the workings of quantum science, uh, uh, it's empowering in a way that normally what we understand as success in life is like about, okay, getting more money, more, name and fame, like we commonly say that. But unless a person is fearless in the true sense, the person has not led a successful life. And fearlessness comes from realizing what you truly are. And that's where Vedanta helps you. Now, it's not difficult to achieve. It's normally like considered to be something that'll take a lifetime to achieve. It's not that. We can do it right here, right now. There are techniques of doing that.
Right. So I'm going to ask you one more question, and this will be my final question. Where do you see the dialogue between Vedanta and quantum science heading in the future? Because there's so much realization about the our own scriptures around the whole world. Where do you see these two heading, especially regarding the exploration of truth?
Both are in the search for truth only and in their own different ways. I would never claim that science is borrowing from Vedanta. They are not doing that. They're doing a lot of hard work, and we have to respect the efforts of the scientists. They're on two different paths, absolutely. But yes, the dialogue is going to happen. I don't know when, it might take a lot of time. Because there are things that are so strikingly similar, like as Vedanta, is being more understood through various means. And as we keep on discovering more things in quantum physics, there's fascinating things like, there's this mention of one of the Upanishad mentions, like it is the vibration of the consciousness that gives rise to names and forms and shapes and birth of various entities. There's the strength here in quantum physics that says that at the basic level, we are not even particles, not even waves. We're vibrating strings of, the vibration of a particular string gives rise to a particular type of particle. So this is just one example. There are many such examples. There's quantum tunneling, there's quantum superposition, and there's the dual nature. All of these are slowly coming together to reach a level where a dialogue is definitely going to happen. And that time, I think, both the disciplines will say, okay, yes, we have been talking about the same thing.
Fascinating. On that note, every time I speak to you, I just think there's not enough time to keep discussing, going into so much detail, but there is a limitation on the time that I have available. Thank you so much for speaking to me about two specific questions as relates to Vedas and the Upanishads. One is, what are the limits of the mind? And second, why is it difficult to recognize the truth? Thank you so much for speaking to me again about both these topics. The amount of knowledge you have of the Vedas, the Upanishads, and our scriptures seems so enormous. I'm always in awe of that. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
I'm just a very humble student of Vedanta, but it's an absolute pleasure to talking to you once again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.